When I was in the middle of high school, something sparked my interest in like the deeper subculture of board games. That there was this whole unexplored aspect of it. So I bought back then. I bought a couple of games. Only one of which two of which I still own: Eldritch Horror and Tragedy Looper, um, and played them a lot with a lot of my friends and my brother, and then kind of just forgot about the hobby for a few years until recently, that I realized that the whole market and industry is currently going through this huge boom where there's just tons of new designers from such a variety of backgrounds, and a lot of cool new ideas happening in games. And for that matter, the community playing games is bigger than ever. Uh, so it just all of a sudden just kind of sprung back into my life. And then I just became interested in buying and playing board games again. Uh, and that's been the last few months pretty nonstop. As far as why I'd want to create them, pretty much with anything I do, like movies and music, and now board games as well. As I dig deeper into it, I'm gonna want something specific. Like I know what genres of music I like, and I know which ones I want to see mashed together. So I do that myself because most bands aren't doing that, and the ones that are is not in the way that I would. So as far as board games, there's a certain style that I want to play, but it touches upon tons of different styles of board games, so nobody's really doing that. So I kind of just have to make it myself. So I guess with anything creative I do, at some point I'm gonna want to combine things in a way that nobody else has done, and I feel like I must do myself. Within the board game community, typically, like major terms you'll hear for describing games, uh, almost in a derogatory way, is there's like Euro games, which originally came from Europe, and that's how they gained their name. And those are games that don't very much so rely on luck, more as they rely on your skill at the game. So it'll usually involve resources or worker placement or something. Uh, and you're never really, most of the time, you're not rolling dice, you're not drawing random cards. You're just relying on where you place pieces around the board and how you choose to interact with other players to win the game. Uh, then the contrary to that would be what's called Ameritrash. Uh, and usually, what defines Ameritrash is that it uses randomness to create drama. So, as far as games that pretty much everyone has played, you have Monopoly, where you move around the board and buy properties. But to get to those properties, you're rolling dice, moving a random amount of space, and then kind of just buying whatever it is you happen to land on, and then suffering for the rest of the game because of it, or you're the one person who wins, and then it's really big and dramatic and this huge moment where you're crushing everybody else, and they're kind of just upset because this whole game is outside of their control and couldn't really do anything. Uh, but as far as games no one's played, but games that even I enjoy, Eldritch Horror, that I said has been in my collection for several years, uh, is this game where you and your friends are collaboratively, not competitively, you're collaboratively working together to solve mysteries, kill cultists and monsters, and prevent them from summoning Cthulhu or some other great elder god so that they don't destroy the world. But the problem, or not the problem, what makes Eldritch Horror an Ameritrash game is that uh, it's almost entirely random. As you're going to locations and investigating them, you're pulling random cards, determining what's going to happen. Then, whatever determines whether you have a positive or negative outcome for that encounter is a dice roll. And your character might be better at some dice rolls, but it's still entirely random. So you can play Eldritch Horror as best to your ability as you can strategize it, but it's still very random. You can play it in your favor by maybe getting yourself more dice for observation rolls, but it's still random. You can have 6 dice and roll all ones, and then it's outside of your power, and it's kind of like, well, that just sucks. My goal for the game I'm working on is it's very Euro inspired in that you're moving around the board and managing resources and exchanging resources, and you have a pretty general knowledge of, if you go to this location, this specifically will happen, and I will be able to make that happen by my own accord if I meet these parameters. You're never rolling dice. However, I want it to be a narrative-driven game. I want there to be a unique story told each game. So there's still going to be a degree of random card pulling that will influence the narrative of the game. Over the past few years, even when I was not playing board games too often, uh, and wasn't even buying new games, I've always just like slowly been synthesizing ideas, and slowly add uh, facets to all of them. But the one that's taken the most precedence as of recently is inspired by the TV show Twin Peaks, and the rest of pretty much every movie created by David Lynch somehow plays an influencing role in this, as well as the video games Silent Hill and Deadly Premonition. And it's weird to say Deadly Premonition because that's a Japanese knockoff of Twin Peaks, but there's enough in it that I'd say that's one of the major influences as well. So the main, story-wise, the main premise of the game is that, let's say, for example, say 1 to 4 people are entering this town, either because they already live there or because they have heard about it, and this town has weird ethereal properties, and people have claimed to experience otherworld encounters in this town. And each person that you play as is trying to accomplish this impossible task that you can pretty much only do with the help of some sort of supernatural force. So over the course of the game, the main loop is that you'll be exploring the town, going to different locations, and interacting with the citizens at those locations. And then after you've done that, you'll take an encounter card, which usually presents you with some sort of moral dilemma. And through these moral dilemmas, it's giving you tokens that have a different symbol on each of them, as well as a different color, but the symbol is there to make it colorblind accessible as well. There's 3 different types of these tokens, and as you make moral or immoral or kind of neutral decisions, you amass a pile of these tokens. And those are one of the main forces for dictating the storytelling of the rest of the game. Because at some point in the game, somebody's task or their objective is going to spawn this big stalker monster that, for that matter, that principle is inspired by video games such as Alien Isolation, Resident Evil 7, and Clock Tower. This big stalker monster that is going to start following around the players and tormenting them and preventing them from completing their objectives. So even though at some points of the game the players might be working a little cooperatively or they might be working directly against each other, that's going to kind of be interfered by now there's this greater force that is stronger than all of them trying to prevent them from their goal. And with your morality pool of those 3 different types of tokens, everybody counts those together when the stalker spawns, and that determines which of the 7 monsters is going to spawn, and they all have unique behaviors. So, and then everybody still needs to complete their objective. So then the main gameplay loop is explore the town, talk to civilians, get encounters, spawn the stalker, try not to let it destroy the whole town and yourself, complete your objective. From a storytelling perspective, I guess what I'm trying to accomplish with this whole thing is this greater concept that your influence on life isn't entirely random. You always have a reaction to the things happening around you, but other people do as well, and those solicit reactions from other people. I guess it's kind of like a meditation on the chaotic nature of existence. So the beginning of production, because like I said, I've had this idea for like a year or 2. The beginning of production was more or less every time I thought of something relating to the game, I would just write it down, and now I just have pages upon pages of information about how the game's supposed to be played in no logical order. So once I got about a week into just jotting down every evolution I had in my head for how the game should work, I then started making playable copy where there really wasn't much to do. It was just 6 locations within the town. There wasn't really a map behind them. They were just all next to each other, so you could move to the adjacent ones. And there was like a couple civilians. And in that model of the game, there was no goal really. It was just a test to see if the actions that I had come up with made sense. So in that first incarnation of the game, when there were 6 locations and not really anything to do, the purpose of me even making that was just taking 2 player characters, moving them around the board, have them start taking actions, see if those actions work and don't immediately break with each other, which at the time they did. And in doing that, I found out what didn't work. Among many things, I took many notes from just that very bare bones copy of the game. So since then, I then added a board underneath so that locations can change based on different playthroughs, based on things happening in the game. I added tons more characters, redid all the character actions, just tried to flesh it out a lot more. The event decks, or the encounters, still, there's like almost none of them. I really need to work on that. But just by making like barely playable models of the game to playtest by myself, it helps me problem solve interactions of actions in a way that I wouldn't have thought of at all if it was just on paper. So it's definitely difficult because if you're not physically playing with it, it's really hard to see what could go wrong together. Based on how frequently I work on the game, which is maybe 3 or 4 days out of the week, I'll spend up to 2 hours working on it. I think that within the next 4 months, I'll have a version that I'm comfortable having other people try. Not that I'll have a finished product, but I'll be ready for other people to play it and see what's broken then. Until then, I've got a long ways to go before it's ready for a group play. Because as it is, if I got together with 3 of my friends and was like, let's try and play this game that I'm making, everybody would get to anybody who's not me would start their turn and be like, I don't really know what I can do right now, and then I'd have to explain to them all the things they can do. And then once they pick one, there would kind of be no point. It's like, okay, well, why did I do that? And I'd be like, you gotta win? I don't know. We'll figure that out. So a few months is going to be a while.